3, 2, 1.
Spartacus declares for president a new Democratic fresh face. So fresh, so face. Proposes an insane tax rate, and Republicans pounce. I'm Ben Shapiro. This is The Ben Shapiro Show. Well, you know Democrats are having a bad week when every headline is about how Republicans are pouncing like a bunch of cats, hiding in the shadows. We pounce. Well, there'll be a lot of pouncing on today's show because Democrats, not good at what they do. Also, lots of making fun of Cory Booker coming up because, come on, man, if I can't make fun of Cory Booker, what was I born to do, people? We'll get to all that in just a second. First, if you want to get somebody a great Valentine's Day gift, and you're not going to go the flowers route, and you don't want to go the sushi at the gas station route, not going to say that's happened before, but we'll just say that you should be looking at Mrs. Fields. I mean, come on. For over 40 years, Mrs. Fields has made delicious treats like their signature chocolate chip cookies and melt-in-your-mouth brownies. And this Valentine's Day, you can find their best-selling cookie cakes and other heart-themed treats that make the perfect present to surprise and delight your Valentine. Mrs. Fields, I mean, how could you not just want to buy it when I say the name? Mrs. Fields, their cookies and sweets are baked and prepared daily. They always arrive fresh and flavorful. Ordering is easy. They can ship your gift anywhere across the United States. Plus, you can now add a personal touch with a custom message or photo. Mrs. Fields even offers a 100% customer satisfaction guarantee, which is pretty sweet. Also, has there anyone who has not been satisfied by Mrs. Fields? Like, is there anybody who's received that gift and been like, you know what, I'm not satisfied, I'm giving it back? Anyone on earth? Probably not. This Valentine's Day, send a delicious gift no one can resist. Right now, get 20% off your order when you go to mrsfields.com and enter promo code Shapiro. That is 20% off any gift for Valentine's Day at mrsfields.com, promo code Shapiro. mrsfields.com, promo code Shapiro. Go check it out right now. I mean, that's a great gift. If I got that, I'm not saying if my wife is listening, if I got that, I'd be real happy. mrsfields.com, promo code Shapiro. All right, so I'm very excited because for a long time, I've been eager to see the Kamala Harris versus Cory Booker versus Elizabeth Warren primary. Who will be the most minority candidate? I mean, Elizabeth Warren, as we all know, is 1/1024th Native American, and Cory Booker is 1/1024th Spartacus. As you recall, the senator from New Jersey back during the Kavanaugh hearings, he's such a bag of tools, Cory Booker. I mean, it's amazing that people take Cory Booker seriously because everything he does is so over-dramatized. You know, I like Senator Ted Cruz. I'm friendly with Senator Ted Cruz. The rap on Senator Cruz back in 2016 when he was running is that everything that he did seemed like it was overthought by a couple of steps. Well, if everything that Cruz did seemed like it was sort of manipulative or overthought during the 2016 campaign, Cory Booker, it's like the guy writes a script in his head and then he says, you know what, this needs more explosions. And then he rewrites the script in his head and then he does it live. It's amazing. So that's why you have situations like Cory Booker during the Kavanaugh hearing. You will recall that there was a series of documents about Brett Kavanaugh that were actually released publicly, like the night before Cory Booker did this. Cory Booker then went out and said, I am violating the rules and I may be banned from this Senate committee for violating the rules by releasing these documents, which were released legally yesterday. And then he said, and these documents will show that Brett Kavanaugh is a vicious racist. And the documents showed no such thing. But he said, if ever there was something like an I am Spartacus moment, this is my I am Spartacus moment. Which is like, you're reading the stage direction, dude. Right? You don't read the stage direction. Like if you want people to call you Spartacus, that's when you have your press guy call up a friendly outlet and say, you know what, call him Spartacus in the press. This is when you do the Donald Trump as John Miller routine. And you call up and you say, this is definitely not Cory Booker. But if it were Cory Booker, he'd be telling you to write a piece about how he's Spartacus. Instead, he just goes out fully publicly and is like, this is my I am Spartacus moment. That's Cory Booker. So Cory Booker is now running the faux sincere campaign. And if you fall for this, you are a dolt. You're a dolt. I mean, I gotta say. So Senator Booker on Thursday began calling members of Congress and informing them he is running for president, the least surprising announcement since Rosie O'Donnell came out of the closet. And he's quietly making overtures to members for support, according to 3 congressional sources. That was yesterday, and then within hours, he had openly announced his intentions. And here is his launch video. And to say that this thing is overproduced and staged and ridiculous would be understatement by omission. It's incredible. It's incredible. I'm going to describe it for you if you can't actually see it. You should go and see it. You should subscribe to Daily Wire so you can see all of the clips that we play and see my reaction to them. But this video is just wonderful because basically the theme of the video is Cory Booker is just a boy from Newark. He's a boy from Newark who made good because he's overcome racism and homophobia and sexism and all. He's not gay, by the way, and all these other things. He's overcome everything in life. He was a Newark boy who became mayor of Newark and still lives in Newark. Now, what's hilarious about this video, as you will see, is that his main message is that he was mayor of Newark and grew up in Newark and spent his entire life in Newark, and it sucks just as much as when he was a kid. That's the underlying theme of the video. So he spends his whole life there trying to make things better, supposedly, and nothing is better in Newark. And by the way, spend some time in Newark, man. That is not a place. No insult to people who have spent their time in Newark. Newark is not one of America's most comfortable cities. Let's just put it that way. And Cory Booker's tenure there didn't do much to help the city of Newark. It's like when Kamala Harris talks about her record in California. And those of us in California are sitting around going, what now? Like, crime rose while you were the AG. And you were the district attorney in San Francisco, which is now a hole. So, well done. It's amazing how failing upward in politics just seems to be endemic. Like, the worse you do, at least on the Democratic side, at least when Rick Perry ran for president of the United States, he'd been a good governor of Texas. Kamala Harris was an awful AG. She'd been an awful senator. She was an awful district attorney in San Francisco. And now you've got Cory Booker, who is a garbage mayor of New Jersey, a garbage senator from New Jersey, and now he's going to run for president of the United States. Being crappy at your job is almost a prerequisite to becoming president of the United States if you are a Democrat. Like, what did Barack Obama do as senator in Illinois that radically made Chicago better? Is Chicago way better now than it was like when Obama got to Chicago? Not seeing a ton of evidence of that. Anyway, here is Cory Booker's ridiculous ad.
I believe that we can build a country where no one is forgotten, no one is left behind.
Okay, pause for a second. Sorry. So we're going to stop and start this. He says we can build a country where no one is left behind. It's a picture of reams of just homeless people. Like, you've been in government, dude. What have you been doing about this problem? Anything? You got a thing? Also, his dramatic reading is so great. So over here at the Daily Wire, we have an execrable host named Michael Knowles. And Michael Knowles is a former actor. And when he acts, he sometimes tends to overdo it. But that is nothing compared to Cory Booker. I mean, Cory Booker is chewing the scenery like he is a starving man on a desert island. He's chewing that scenery. It's just great. So continue, Mr. Booker.
Food on the table, where there are good paying jobs with good benefits in every neighborhood, where our criminal justice system keeps us safe instead of shuffling more children into cages and coffins, where we see the faces of our leaders on television and feel pride,
and then it's a picture of him. No kidding.
It's not a matter of can we. It's a matter of do we have the collective will.
Okay, so can we pause it there for a second? I'm just wondering, at what point do we actually get the big screen reveal that this is actually the movie Drumline? Because you'll hear throughout this ad people drumming, and there's actual video of random people drumming. It's like some white chick in her apartment, and she's drumming away, and then he's walking through a high school corridor, and people are drumming away. I was hoping that maybe he would break into song, or maybe he'd just start breakdancing in the middle of the video, just for like entertainment value. But it's like he took all of the cliches and he put them in a cliche nuclear reactor, and out came a cliche nuclear rod that is radioactive but also extraordinarily powerful. Continue.
Will. I believe we do. Together, we will channel our common pain back into our common purpose. Together, America, we will rise. I'm Cory Booker, and I'm running for president of the United States of America.
Wow. So together, we will rise. Yeah, so much excitement, so much fake excitement. It's just, you gotta love it. You gotta love it. It's just spectacular. And here's the thing. He's gonna crowd that lane, right? There's an intersectional lane that he's trying to run in. Now, what's funny about Booker is that when Booker started, his entire pitch is that he actually was the bipartisan Democrat. So you'll recall, if you look back at his career, Jim Garrity does this at National Review, that he started by taking on a Democratic machine in Newark, and he ran in Newark on the platform that I'm not a radical Democrat. He first lost, and then he won. And his big thing when he was mayor of Newark was making these big dramatic announcements. So in 2010, he joined Chris Christie, who was then the governor of New Jersey, with whom he was very friendly at the time, and Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg on the Oprah Winfrey Show to accept an eye-popping gift, $100 million to reform Newark public schools, with local philanthropists and others matching it and raising it to $200 million. right? It was a really good day for Cory Booker. And then you'll recall that as mayor of Newark, he decided that he was going to do like the food stamp test and try to live on supplemental nutrition assistance every day for a month, which didn't even make sense because it's supplemental nutrition assistance. It's not supposed to be like the entirety of your income for the entire month. But then when he went to the Senate, he just decided that he was going to give up being bipartisan at all. That was because there was real backlash to him in 2012. People were attacking private equity, and Booker fought back against that. Booker said, why are we attacking private equity? He says, we're getting to a ridiculous point in America, especially that I know I live in a state where pension funds, unions, and other people are investing in companies like Bain Capital. If you look at the totality of Bain Capital's record, they've done a lot to support business, to grow business, and this to me, I'm very uncomfortable with. The last point I'll make is this kind of stuff is nauseating to me on both sides. It's nauseating to the American public. Enough is enough. Stop attacking private equity. And then the Democrats came down on him, and then he flipped. And then he released a video that completely reversed himself. Now private equity was absolutely terrible. Now, when he left as mayor of Newark, nothing actually had happened in Newark. Right? Here was the New York Times upon him leaving. When snow blanketed this city 2 Christmases ago, Mayor Cory Booker was celebrated around the nation for personally shoveling out residents who had appealed for help on Twitter. But here, his administration was scorned as streets remained impassable for days because the city had no contract for snow removal. Last spring, Ellen DeGeneres presented Mr. Booker with a superhero costume after he rushed into a burning building to save a neighbor. But Newark had eliminated 3 fire companies after the mayor's plan to plug a budget hole failed. In recent days, Mr. Booker has made the rounds of the national media with his pledge to live on food stamps for a week, but his constituents do not need to be reminded that 6 years after the mayor came into office vowing to make Newark a model of urban transformation, their city remains an emblem of poverty. So there he is, like walking around doing his "I'm cool, Newark's an awesome place" thing. He didn't make it an awesome place. It continued to be Newark. And again, credit to people who live in Newark. They're braver than I. But come on. Cory Booker is a fraud. He's been a fraud for a long time. And he is just maintaining his fraudulent status. Doesn't mean he won't get the royal treatment from the media, of course. We'll get to that in just 1 second. First, let's talk about a great gift that you can get for yourself or for a friend. I'm talking about the gift of an awesome watch at a price that is not going to break the bank. Okay, Movement watches are just fantastic. I know, I own 2 of them. My dad owns one, my mom owns one, my wife owns one. Like, we got them for everyone in the family because they are sleek, they are minimalist, they are really good looking watches. I wear one every day. They're terrific. And not only are they good, they are also not wildly expensive. And you know that I'm all about supporting grounds up entrepreneurs who work hard for what they want. That's why I love Movement watches. They're a true success story. It makes wearing their products that much more meaningful. They made a name for themselves in one of the most established markets in the world. They've reached exponential growth. It's a really, really great company. Movement watches start at just $95. You're looking at $400 to $500 for the same quality at department stores. Clean design, minimal. They have great quality products. Movement has sold almost 2 million watches in over 160 countries. And right now, you get 15% off today with free shipping and free returns by going to mvmt.com/Shapiro. See why Movement keeps growing. Check out their expanding collection. Go to mvmt.com/Shapiro and join the movement. Again, when you use that /Shapiro, you get 15% off today. Now, when I say that Cory Booker is a fraud, I mean that in the most literal sense. I mean, the man is legitimately a fraud. You'll recall that a few years ago, there was a big controversy because he made up a friend. He made up his Newark friend. Eliana Johnson, who's now a reporter for the Washington Post, at the time writing for National Review, talked about this street character who he'd known, who it turned out was a composite from his life. Right, here is Eliana Johnson writing about this. She says, "The tale is one Booker admits he's told 1,000,000 times, according to the Newark Star-Ledger. Ronald Rice Jr., a Newark City councilman and Booker ally who has known the mayor since 1998, says the T-Bone story was a fixture of Booker's unsuccessful 2002 mayoral bid against corrupt Newark political boss Sharp James. What exactly was the story? T-Bone was a drug pusher that the mayor said threatened his life at one turn and sobbed on his shoulder at the next. The problem is that T-Bone does not exist. Okay, the T-Bone tale never sat right with Rutgers University history professor Clement Price, a Booker supporter who told National Review Online he found the mayor's story offensive because it pandered to a stereotype of inner-city black men. T-Bone, Price says, is a Southern-inflected name. You would expect to run into something or someone named T-Bone in Memphis, not Newark. So T-Bone, it turns out, is fake. And this is not the first time that Booker has lied about things. But it just shows that the guy is just a fraud. And the media are going to treat him as the second coming because they've always treated him as the second coming because he does weird, quirky things that the media likes. Like he's a vegan and he likes to talk about how he gets manicures. All right, so He left his city in shambles. He's been a garbage senator. He came into the Senate promising bipartisan cooperation. And then one of his first moves was to endorse the awful Iran deal over the objections of a lot of his own Jewish supporters who were very upset with him. So Cory Booker in the race, just another candidate for you to learn to dislike. Very exciting stuff. Meanwhile, the Democrats continue to promote their most radical proposals. And this is also the problem for Cory Booker. Booker's main appeal originally was that he was a guy who could reach across the aisle. But the Democratic Party no longer wants to reach across the aisle. They want to push further and further to the left. And this is why they've endorsed legitimately bad people like Ilhan Omar, the representative from Minnesota. So she had a couple of viral quotes in the last 48 hours. Viral quote number one, she said that Israel should not exist. Okay, she's an anti-Semite, Ilhan Omar. There's just no doubt about this. I mean, she's associated with people who are terrorist-friendly. She has essentially she's now calling for the abolition of the only Jewish state on planet Earth. She has suggested that Israel has deceived the world and may Allah lift the veil from people's eyes. And Ilhan Omar is a bad lady. She's a bad lady. And here is Ilhan Omar explaining on Yahoo News that Israel really should not exist. It should just stop existing.
When I see Israel institute law that recognizes it as a Jewish state and does not recognize the other religions that are living in it, and we still uphold it as a democracy in the Middle East, I almost chuckle because I know that if we see that in any other society, we would criticize it. We would call it out. We do that to Iran. We do that to any other place that sort of upholds its religion.
She's a crazy person. I mean, what she's saying here is patently false. It is patently false. The reason that we criticize Iran is not because it is a state that has Islam as its official religion. The reason that we criticize Iran is because Iran is a repressive dictatorship that murders gay people, imprisons dissidents, and prevents people from freely exercising their religion. Israel doesn't do any of those things. There are many states, by the way, in Eastern Europe that have Christianity as their official religion. The idea that an internal Jewish state law that says that Judaism is the official state religion of the Jewish state, that this is in any way controversial in a country where Christians are free to live, work, and prosper, Muslims are freer in Israel than they are in any Muslim country on planet Earth, that you can compare that to Iran. Okay, and this lady is on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. She's on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. That's where they put her. And the Democrat, but they're not radical. She also said, Ilhan Omar, that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's proposal to tax the super wealthy, people who make above, about $10 million a year, to tax them at 70%. She said that doesn't go far enough. Here was her explanation of what she thinks the tax code should be.
There are a few things that we can do. One of them is that we could increase the taxes that people are paying, who are the extremely wealthy in our community. So 70%, 80%, we've had it as high as 90%.
I think what picks up for a lot of people is taxing the rich up to 80, 90% or 70.
Yeah.
And,
The 1% must pay their fair share.
Okay, the 1%. Let me explain something. The 1% are not people making $10 million or above per year. They're people making about $400,000 per year as a couple. And she's talking about now taxing them at 90%. At 90%. And by the way, if you think the Democrats are going to stop there, you're totally wrong. I mean, they're not going to stop there because the truth is there just isn't enough income from that group to support any of the programs they're talking about. As I've said repeatedly on the program, if you want Denmark-type socialism, you have to have Denmark-type tax rates. And that means 60% taxation, leaving aside the VAT tax on people who are making like 60 grand and above. Because we're going to spend even more than Denmark on these programs. Okay, so this is just madness. The Democrats have gone completely radical on all this. And that's why Cory Booker can't run as old Cory Booker. He can't run as the bipartisan guy who is going to reach across the aisle. No one in his party wants that. Even his opening campaign ad, which is purportedly about unity, all that's going to go by the wayside. It's going to be about who can punch Republicans more strongly in the mouth. And Democrats now have to engage in this sort of self-delusion where they are actually moderate. It's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. The leader in self-delusion in the country right now is Paul Krugman. Now, Paul Krugman won a Nobel Prize, not for economics generally, because economics is an entire field. He won a Nobel Prize for his trade theory stuff. His trade theory stuff is quite good, Paul Krugman. On everything else, the man is a dunce. And when it comes to politics, he is particularly ridiculous. So he has an article today ripping on Howard Schultz, which has become the stock in trade for the entire left-wing media. Howard Schultz is the bad guy. Howard Schultz is a bad guy because he's a centrist. We don't need centrists right now. Here's what Paul Krugman writes, trying to convince himself almost that Democrats are not in fact radical. He says, why is American politics so dysfunctional? Whatever the deeper roots of our distress, the proximate cause is ideological extremism. Powerful factions are committed to false views of the world, regardless of the evidence. Notice that I said factions, plural. There's no question that the most disruptive, dangerous extremists are on the right. Well, I mean, there is a fair bit of question about that, considering that Democrats are now talking about overthrowing the entire American healthcare system, overthrowing the entire American transportation system, and restructuring the entire American economy. If I had to make a bet, I would say those people are slightly more dangerous than Donald Trump tweeting stupid crap from the White House. He says, but there's another faction whose obsessions and refusal to face reality have also done a great deal of harm. But I'm not talking about the left. Shocker. It turns out that there are factions that are bad, but not the left. The left is not a bad faction. Radical leftists are virtually non-existent in American politics. This is Paul Krugman writing this, a radical leftist. Radical leftists are virtually non-existent in American politics. Can you think of any prominent figure who wants to move to the left of, say, Denmark? Denmark is pretty far to the left, dude. I mean, Denmark, as I just mentioned, has tax rates that are unbelievably exorbitant on people who are lower middle class. What are you even talking about? But I guess when you reshift the entire framework of politics so that suddenly Denmark becomes middle of the road, all right, I mean, I guess it's a thing you can do. He says he's really worried about fanatical centrists. Fanatical centrists. He says, first, there's an obsession with public debt. This obsession might have made some sense back in 2010, when some feared a Greek-style crisis, although even then I could have told you that such fears were misplaced. In fact, I did, right? You also said the internet would not be a thing in the economy, Paul Krugman. So if we're going to go back to your record of predictions, there's been some good and there's been some bad. He says, in any case, however, 8 years have passed since Erskine Bowles and Alan Simpson predicted a fiscal crisis within 2 years, unless their calls for spending cuts were heeded, yet U.S. borrowing costs remain at historical lows. And then he says that anybody who thinks that the debt is a problem is crazy. That's crazy. It's not crazy to say that you want a Green New Deal that would cost $50 trillion over 10 years. It is crazy, however. It is totally crazy to say that the national debt is a problem. And then he continues along these lines. He says, in general, centrists are furiously opposed to any proposal that would ease the lives of ordinary Americans. Universal health coverage, said Schultz, would be free health care for all, which the country cannot afford. And he's not alone in saying things like that. A few days ago, Michael Bloomberg declared that extending Medicare to everyone, as Kamala Harris suggests, would bankrupt us for a very long time. Now, single-payer healthcare, actually called Medicare, hasn't bankrupted Canada. In fact, every advanced country besides America has some form of universal health coverage and manages to afford it. First of all, America does have a basic form of universal health coverage. It is basically Medicaid. It is Medicaid and emergency room forced care. Right? So the idea that people are dying on the streets in America is simply a left lie. It is also true the vast majority of spending on healthcare in the United States is done in the private sector by people who voluntarily pay into the private sector. The United States spends something on the order of I believe it was $60 trillion a year. So I'll have to look this up. It would be $60 trillion over the next decade that America could be expected to spend on healthcare. Obviously not $60 trillion a year. $60 trillion over the next decade that we could be expected to spend on healthcare. About $28 trillion of that was expected to be public, and about $32 trillion was expected to be private. Okay, so that means that a lot of the spending that's being done is voluntary spending by people who are freely alienating their money in return for quicker healthcare. But according to Paul Krugman, it is not radical at all to say you're going to completely abolish 1/4 of the American industry. So radical centrists are the real problem. He says, where does the fanaticism of the centrists come from? Sheer vanity. Both pundits and plutocrats like to imagine themselves as superior beings, standing above the political fray. I mean, does Paul Krugman own a mirror? Somebody. We need a government program to buy Paul Krugman a mirror. If we tax everybody 1 cent, we can buy him a magnificent mirror. They want to think of themselves as standing tall against extremism, right and left. Yet the reality of American politics is asymmetric polarization. Extremism on the right is a powerful political force, while extremism on the left isn't. The answer for centrists is retreating into a fantasy world, almost as hermetic as the right-wing Fox News bubble. In this fantasy world, social democrats like Harris or Warren are portrayed as the second coming of Hugo Chavez, so that taking what is actually a conservative position can be represented as a brave defense of moderation. So now Howard Schultz is an out-and-out conservative. So in order to defend the extremism of their own cause, Howard Schultz becomes a conservative and Ilhan Omar becomes a moderate. Pretty amazing stuff. But this is how the media generally have treated the extremism of the Democrats. Excuse me. So what's hilarious over the last week is that we have seen in the last week Kamala Harris embrace Medicare for all, abolishing private health insurance, and then run screaming from it. We have seen Democrats embrace murder of the unborn up to point of birth, including dilation, according to Kathy Tran, the state senator in Virginia, the state delegate in Virginia. We have seen Democrats embrace tax rates that would make Hugo Chavez extraordinarily happy. I mean, 90% on the top 1%. That's a pretty solid tax rate right there from Ilhan Omar and company. And yet, the way that the media have covered these things is always Republicans pounce. It's an amazing thing. I really have never seen a bevy of headlines. Whenever Republicans make a mistake, it's never Democrats pounce as Republicans reel. It's never Democrats pouncing. But Republicans pounce has become such a meme that people on the right know that as soon as Democrats do something bad, there will be a bevy of articles about Republicans pouncing. So here is an actual headline from the Washington Post. I kid you not. I'm reading it straight. I'm not making it up. Okay. Quote, Republicans seize on liberal positions to paint Democrats as radical. Do you mean we quote them? Like we play clips of them, like on places like this show, and then we say they're radical because they're like, radical? It's by Matt Visor. Senator Kamala Harris is raising the possibility of eliminating private health insurance. Senator Elizabeth Warren and other prominent Democrats are floating new and far-reaching plans to tax the wealthy. In Virginia, Governor Ralph Northam voiced support for state legislation that would reduce restrictions on late-term abortions. Democrats, after 2 years largely spent simply opposing everything President Trump advocated, are defining themselves lately in ways Republicans are seizing on to portray them as far outside the American mainstream. Well, those Republicans, dastardly Republicans, suggesting that these positions are outside the mainstream. What if there were, like some poll data? Well, let's assume maybe there were companies that did polls about these issues. And then we could actually determine whether these were extreme positions, for example. Oh, wait, there are. When people are told that Medicare for all would raise their taxes, only 26% of Americans support that. When Americans are asked about whether they would ban all semi-automatic weapons, as Kamala Harris suggested, only 40% of Americans back that. When Americans are asked whether they support the ability to abort a baby at dilation, 81% of Americans oppose. Yes, these numbers are available. But no, it's Republicans pouncing. It's all about the pouncing. Republicans are like the bobcat. They're just going to pounce on you. That's their thing. I love it. That's not the only one. New York Times doing exactly the same thing. Trump, Pence lead GOP seizure of late-term abortion as a potent 2020 issue. They seized it. The GOP seized it. Okay, you know what's a way that the Republicans couldn't have actually seized on the issue is if Democrats hadn't tried to pass bills in Vermont, Virginia, and New York, and Rhode Island in the last week, trying to say that late-term abortion was an affirmative good. Then there wouldn't have been anything like, let's say that Republicans tried to seize on Democratic support for murdering all people above the age of 80. It would be hard for them to seize on that because Democrats haven't actually made that proposal. It would be hard to seize on it. But whenever this is the Andrew Klavan rule of the media, whenever a Democrat screws something up, the story is the Republican reaction. Whenever a Republican screws something up, the story is the Republican screwing something up. But no, don't worry. There is no bias in the media, Virginia. Don't worry. No bias in the media whatsoever. They are just even-handed truth tellers seeking to be firefighters, bringing you the realities of life. By the way, it is worth noting here that for all of the talk from people like Paul Krugman and folks in the Democratic mainstream about the realism of their proposals, taking crises like climate change super seriously and all of this, as soon as you dig beneath the surface, you realize that even their more mainstream positions are actually pretty radical and pretty dumb. I'll explain in just a second when it comes to climate change. First, you're going to have to go over to dailywire.com and subscribe. $9.99 a month gets you a subscription. Remember, if you're not a Daily Wire subscriber, you are missing out. Our next Sunday special guest is none other than the great Dave Ramsey. It's a great episode. If you are a subscriber, you and only you can watch this episode a full day early. So the Sunday special becomes the Saturday special. I didn't film it on Shabbos. Don't worry, my Jewish fans. But only if you are a Daily Wire subscriber. What are you waiting for? It's time to subscribe. Go click subscribe. You'll thank me later, as in later today. Because later today, we have another 2 hours of this show. My goodness, the amount of content we bring to you lucky people. Go check it out right now. $9.99 a month. Also, annual subscription, $99 a year. You get this. The very greatest in all beverage vessels. Cast your eyes upon it and despair that you own it not. The leftist tears, hot or cold tumbler. It is magnificent. If only that guy at the end of Indiana Jones and the Holy Grail had chosen this, he would still be alive instead of having crumbled into dust. He chose poorly. Go check us out over at dailywire.com. Subscribe. Also subscribe at YouTube and iTunes. Leave us a nice review because that's the kind of person you are. You're nice. Just go do that. Do that right now. I'm waiting. Okay, well, wait. Okay, now you're done. Good, great. Go do that. And, thanks. We are the largest, fastest growing conservative podcast and radio show in the nation.